I was met with the single most stunning response I've ever received on any issue. I was told that the words biological and genetic have no business being in a discussion around sex and gender. I was told trans women are women, they are female, they're girls, and no language that minimizes that point should be tolerated. I was told it was an offensive question, my language was out of date. I was told that sex and gender are equally important and that the ACLU is actively removing sex from legal documentations and legal language. I tried to gently prod at the preposterous arguments I was hearing, and I was met with an absolute brick wall when she concluded with, "Let me tell you with certainty, the ACLU will never represent cis women against women."
Thank you so much for joining me. I'm so grateful that I found you on Twitter. Like, I've been a fan of the anonymous Kim Jones for a year now. Ever since that,
it has been a year. Yep.
Yeah. Since that Mother of Swimmer podcast, that actually was the final shift when I started speaking out publicly. When I listened to that, I couldn't take it anymore. Wow. I mean, it was a watershed moment for me. I just cried and cried in my hotel room. It was very, very powerful. I've sent it to so many people. It was
when I was giving that, I was like, I was so scared and so nervous, but so emotional. I just remember like grabbing onto my legs, and my husband sitting over in the corner of the room being like, "You can do this."
So I mean, you were brilliant, and your emotion it just made everything more poignant and authentic. Nothing was forced about it. And it was just, and you spoke in very plain terms, which I'd only really seen one other person do, Kara Dansky, when she went on Tucker Carlson, where you didn't, it becomes much more harrowing. And you see the gut-wrenching reality when you're speaking in plain terms, when you're not calling a man, when you're not respecting preferred pronouns, when you're calling out the situation exactly for what it is.
Well, I was very careful about that because I had found in talking to people who weren't involved in the situation before the media, really blew up on it. When you said things like, "She shouldn't swim with the women," you sound terrible. You sound like you're leaving someone out. But as soon as you say he shouldn't swim with the women, it's very clear that there's a problem. So, and people just think, well, of course. So language is where it's at. And I think it's a hard, I've talked with several friends about this, but I think you kind of go on a life cycle with this where and especially as women, where I think we're conditioned to just do as people ask, get through a situation, that's intimidating. You think, okay, this is how I have to be. I have to give this away, but I still want to make my point. And then you slowly come to understand that if you don't have control of the language, you don't even have a discussion. You don't have a way to make an argument.
Oh yeah, they went after the language first, specifically for that reason. And they also went after prisons first.
I didn't realize that. That was something
that was their play. They went after prisons because, it was a good play. I hate to say it, but it worked because if you say men can be in women's prison, you basically say they can be anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Because that's the most vulnerable area you could possibly be in. You're locked in a space with no escape. Right.
And it's also hidden, so you work behind the scenes that way, and then sports becomes easier, but sports is also by far the most public.
Okay. Yes. So this is why I think sports is so important. And I think your visibility point is well taken as well. This is so prolific in sports at lower levels right now. It's just not reported in the media. It's very prolific. I mean, I have friends from around the country now that send me pictures of their daughters in cross-country races where there'll be 3 or 4 boys competing in the women's category. And the issue they have is that some of the state laws, like in California, for instance, they can't even question, they can't speak out, they can't they're so intimidated, the girls are, that they'll get kicked out of school or face repercussions, that they can't make any statement about it. So it's or they can, but they're too intimidated at this point. Well, and then also volleyball. I mean, it's just everywhere. So
the volleyball, the head injuries, doesn't it happen now twice? I know it happened at least once, but now it seems like multiple schools can't play with this teenage boy because.
Yeah, that was on the East Coast, but on the West Coast, I mean, I have videos from friends whose daughter, I mean, 6'5" male in high school, spiking balls across a net that's 7 inches lower than it should be for a male body. So yeah, it's prevalent and no one knows about it. The media isn't covering it. So the visibility issue is a big problem. Everyone thinks, is if you point, if women's suffering or abuse or not receiving fair treatment isn't visible, the public can't care. So as long as the news refuses to report on it, it's hard to get people involved and to recognize the problems.
Yeah. And when you see Lia Thomas, because that ended up,
blowing
I sort of credit Lia Thomas in a way for peaking the world. I've said that before because you see a 6'4" man just dominating on national television, and you're just like, it's Orwellian.
Yes.
The gaslighting becomes so evident. You can't deny that. And I mean, I'm 5'10", and I am the tallest woman in 99.9% of the rooms I walk into.
Mm-hmm. No, and my daughter is 6 feet.
Yeah.
So who had to race against Lia? Lia was giant next to her.
Oh. And then the bone density, the measurements, women's hips, the physics of it. Like my sister was a star runner, but her best times were her freshman year, and she got
women's bodies change.
Yeah,
it's common. No, for sure. And the Lia Thomas, the physique of Lia or Will it was so painfully obvious on a pool deck that you were watching a man in a women's bathing suit. There was nothing normal about it. It was not to sit there and watch it. You're Orwellian, dystopian, it was otherworldly. I still remember as I was learning about all this and as it came out and I was getting ready to even watch the race, I mean, you can't really prepare yourself for something like that. It's such a paradigm shift of expecting sports to be this place that for women, for female athletes, of expecting it to be this place that uplifts just the bringing your best to the game, bringing your best effort forward, celebrating what human bodies are capable of. There's so many problems with it other than comparing male and female physiques in a physical contest, which I do think is a really important way to get back to reality, because it is, as you said, the public arena of the difference between the sexes. So sports is huge in putting that on display for everyone to see so clearly. But even more, the idea that sports is supposed to be this celebration of humanity's capabilities and how we, sportsmanship, how we keep ourselves under control and how we lose and win graciously and all these, you throw all that out the window if you just say the fairness aspect doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if someone's cheating or doing something wrong, or I don't know. It was bad.
No, absolutely. And you spoke brilliantly at a conference. One of your Icons conferences that you put on YouTube as well, and you spoke about not only that your grandmother told you when you were a young athlete that I never got a chance to do this, but also you spoke about the fact that the thing you took for granted was that when you walked out on any court, because you were a tennis player, that they respected you. That there was a level of, you deserve to be there as a respected athlete. And brazen disrespect. And it's so heartbreaking because it's really 1-2 generations had this, and now it's going away again. It's just, my mother told me she, the same thing, and she did track and stuff like that. And she was the first, she had it, I had it, and now it's going, like, now Gen Z and younger millennials are getting it robbed from them. It's just,
well, and the crazy thing is that so many don't seem to understand what it is they're losing. There have been a lot of those lessons that I think we learned in elementary school about history repeating itself, or, as you're in high school and you're like, oh, wow, the wars, the cycle of humanity and how bad we are to each other, how civilizations rise and fall, the progress. I'd always, you're taught that there's only one direction for progress, right? That's not true.
It's never really been true. There's always a backlash, and women's rights are never, I think we're learning this the hard way. They're never safe.
Right.
There's something that's biological within the suppression of women too, that there's always going to be a push and pull there. Women are always going to have to stay vigilant. And yes. I think we're starting to realize that, because I grew up with everything,
Totally. I mean, I think, well, at least you're younger than I am.
But like I don't think that, I don't know. I don't want to date you, but Roe was, only 50 years ago. So it's like, you're probably very young then. I was like not born yet. My mom was alive for and now that's like within under 50 years, it's gone. Now title. It's what's so upsetting is the two landmark achievements of the 1970s for feminists are one's pretty much.
So Roe and Title IX are simultaneous with my birth or just predate it. I can't remember the exact dates of it, but yeah, the idea that women's rights have just gone very quickly from 50 years ago. And now to know that this movement was occurring for the last 15 years, or, at least the last 10, it's amazing to see that the footholds that something gained that was working in direct opposition to letting women continue to thrive and find their place and their voice. It's really frustrating.
And you've talked about before, it's not even just sports and the opportunities when it comes to scholarships, but it's the relationships you can make in collegiate athletics too that lead to other places that you're also robbing from women who already have to deal with. You said something I kind of want to get you to talk about. You mentioned like fabrics being pulled and kind of one-step fabrics being unweaved. Can you, I want you to say it because you'll say it so much better than I can.
I think what I noticed, I think there's this, all of our lives are a fabric, right, of relationships. And there's something really important about understanding people who have a similar fabric to your own or a similar thread to your own. But one thing I noticed for my husband, who was also a high-level athlete, is that the connections and relationships of all the other athletes that he had grown up with, competed against, that you all have this common understanding of what each other has gone through, what it takes, discipline, dedication, like competitive spirit, all of these other attributes that come along with sport. And the men don't have to take a breather from their careers, or either in athletics or when they develop go into a different field later on. And that fabric kind of continues to weave itself around to support them. So the one can get together with people in another part of the country, or an athlete. Oh, I know someone else who works in that field. Do you know so-and-so? Like that is the network that evolves out of your life experience. And the life experience of athletes in particular drive and success, and those benefit you later on. And women, because of our reproductive capabilities, have to take a step out of that. And that's what I was trying to explain, is that we have to pull our threads out for a while. Mm-hmm. There is we don't, and even if we say we don't have to, the likelihood that we will is extremely high. And it should be a reasonable choice, a reasonable expectation for women to, have to take care of their bodies when they're bringing children into the world, and for raising children and families. That should be a non-negotiable. But to be able to go
should be honored, revered, celebrated, and lifted up.
It shouldn't be a punishment if you want to.
No.
Have to go back in. So we pull those threads out, and it's like the fabric of the web of our opportunities and connections falls apart for a few years in a way that men's doesn't. And there's going to be no getting around that, because we are the ones that bear the children and have those, have
that superpower.
Have that superpower. That's right.
It's a superpower. I mean, come on. Now, you just put the NCAA on notice a couple of weeks ago with your foundation, Icons. How did that all start? I mean, you founded it sort of with grassroots.
How did Icons start, or how did the idea? Okay, so Icons has an interesting background. When we were going through the Lia Thomas situation, and I was writing hundreds of letters, I wrote to every board member of the NCAA, every one of their secretaries, personal assistants, athletic directors, to try to communicate with university presidents. I got, of those hundreds of emails I sent, I got one message back. And I was like, wow, okay, this is dismissed. That was part of that discussion of, oh, you can write a letter to complain. And I thought, this isn't cutting it. I'm not done yet. And I knew everyone else was feeling this way. I mean, we were on the phone as parents. I was speaking with other athletes. I was reaching out to women that I hadn't talked to in decades that had been part of my athlete network. And all of them were seeing this and were frustrated. It was the first wake-up call that things were at risk. So over the course of the months of, last year's swim season, I tried to reach out to, as you know, the ACLU. I tried to reach out to the National Women's Law Center, the places that I thought women would be able to go to have support, to be able to recognize their rights and their representation in society. And what I quickly learned, as you heard, is that there was nowhere left. Everywhere was backing men who wanted access to women's spaces and rights and language. And they were so, the conversation that I paraphrased there in just a couple sentences was, and then I had several others, learning that sex is being removed from legal documentation, that sex is not spoken about clearly and articulately in law, in the court system. If we don't have language, if we don't have legal documentation, if we can't get our lawyers to use the words that define us apart from men, how in the heck are we ever going to defend women's rights? It's an impossibility.
Yeah.
So, those were really hard months when I was coming to that conclusion, but then reaching out to just some really dynamic, inspirational women like Nancy Hogshead Makar and a bunch of Martina Navratilova, Donna De Verona, a bunch of women who'd been in leadership positions in women's organizations. And then Kara Dansky was enormously influential to me.
Yeah.
She's the one that said, you really need to speak up about this. Women need to hear this. And I can put you in front of a friendly crowd to just get your feet wet. And I thought, okay, maybe I can manage this. But this is the new network, right, that we're building of women who want to support women. And we're having to create new organizations. So now there's WDI, Women's Declaration, and Wolf, Women's Liberation Front. And for the more, conservative women, there's Independent Women's Forum, although they're very centrist, in my opinion. And then, Concerned Women for America for the more religious, traditional lobbying, but again, nonpartisan. I think that, and then Icons, I thought we've got to have a place for female athletes. Look at what's happened to women between the Larry Nassar trials, in the last few years, the Me Too movement that came out. I know too many friends who have been through sexual abuse in sports. Safe Sport just coming up. There needed to be an organization that was defending the female voice in sport and making sure that we weren't facing sex-based discrimination. So I tried reaching out to the Women's Sports Foundation. They didn't see eye to eye with us on this. And so it was time to found a new one. When I ran into Marshy, my co-founder, she was fighting this as hard as she could as well, asking the NCAA to give women a voice. And she just jumped in, had already taken a booth out at the National Association for Collegiate Directors of Athletics conference. And she said, I love it when she says, I just envisioned myself standing there alone in the booth, handing out information and trying to talk to whoever I could. And I thought, wow, there are so many of us that feel this way. It's time for us to link arms. And if there's one thing women are really good at, it's getting organized and getting stuff done.
That's what I think is the Trojan horse, not the right word. I think that their Achilles heel is that they have grossly underestimated the level to which women will fight, especially for their children. Women are warriors.
No, yeah.
Warriors that will, I mean, Trevor Noah has a really great sort of bit on this that I think encapsulates. A dad's going to go, if I think it was a snake, but if snake's going after a kid, a dad's going to run in there, but he's going to kind of be like, like a little bitter about it. Like, I can make another one of you, but a woman's just going to run in and save her baby from the lion's den. Women are fearless when it comes to protecting their babies overall. And there's no one more fierce than a woman fighting for herself and her children. There's just not.
Well, and there, I can tell you, there's nothing worse than sitting somewhere like, gosh, last year, sitting in the stands of those swim meets and thinking there's nothing I can do to protect my daughter from this. Oh, it was public humiliation.
I know.
So I think, gosh, I'm going to get emotional.
And just knowing that your daughter was like, I cried too when, she just said she was going to I'll count my towels, how many towels I need to, like, it's not even just the public humiliation of like,
oh, it's private also.
It's like, it's rape culture.
I asked my daughter what she would do if Lia was changing in there. And she said resignedly, I'm not sure I have a choice. I still can't believe I had to tell my adult age daughter, you always have a choice about whether you undress in front of a man. What messages had these girls been receiving this year? How many of the other girls were feeling this? My heart was ripped apart. Damage far greater than the sports arena was now apparent to me.
It's grooming, it's rape culture, it's gaslighting, it's abuse, it's psychological abuse.
It's not just, it's psychological warfare on women.
Yeah.
That's what the whole thing is.
It really is.
Trying to tell women that they are a thought in a man's head, that a man can claim their identity, or that a man can claim their space or demand access to their bodies. These are things that
it's colonization too.
I'm crying, but I'm angry inside. And I think women react emotionally differently to different things. When I get angry, I get emotional. Yeah. So unless, I think it just kind of breaks down my like, oh, I can't just stay composed. This is something I have to go for. But what in talking to my daughter and in this, I mean, we have talked for hours about this, obviously, now over the course of this last year. What we're fighting for is the next generation of girls to be allowed dignity and self-respect.
Yeah.
It's that basic. We can't, if there are boys or men who feel like they don't fit in, as a woman, I think we all understand, and this is something I think most of us can relate to. I don't know a woman who doesn't have some amount of body dysmorphia.
Yeah.
That doesn't wish her body would change, that doesn't wish that she looked this way or looked that way, whether it's stronger, taller, longer legs, better hair, bluer eyes, browner eyes, you name it,
yeah.
your skin. So I think, and women have been objectified, obviously, for so long. And so our physical appearance has been, an enormous part of how we've gained respect or position in society. So to understand another person who says they don't like their body for whatever the reason, I think it's something most of us can relate to and have empathy for. That doesn't mean that a male should be allowed to claim he wants to exist as a woman. It doesn't mean he should get to claim our identity and our spaces and our dignity and our name and our language.
Women are emotional support animals.
That's right. So I have empathy for that. I think people who are still in the dark on what this means to women and how regressive this is.
Yeah.
Because I honestly don't think there is anything more oppressive or regressive to women than telling them they can't exist apart from men, period.
Oh, 100%.
Or by stereotypes.
There's nothing more regressive than saying stereotypes change your reality. Come on.
Not just stereotypes, but that a man gets to define us, who we are in our labels.
And the way they define us is
by their thoughts.
Well, and it's also, I mean, they view women as the majority of them, it's sissified, subjugated, abused, dominated woman. That is what the AGP variety, which is what Lia Thomas is. I mean, Lia Thomas, I think, is kind of a new cohort of trans category that if ever we're allowed to talk about this honestly in academia will be talked about. I think there's a level of social media and narcissism going on. Totally. I think there's a level of trans maxing, which is a new thing where boys and men literally think they will have an easier life living as a woman. And then, there's the original trans identities, the two for men that were the ones I still have sympathy for are the ones that were the gender dysphoric kids from a very young age, the ones you talk with that reject their sexed bodies, and they almost always grow up to be same-sex attracted, like almost 100%, sometimes bisexual. Right, and then there's the straight ones. And it's
the problem, you're right, but the problem
it's a fetish for them.
Yes. The problem with Lia Thomas situation where you're saying, okay, so maybe Lia's, and many of these men competing in women's sports aren't, although some of them are posting quite pornography, there's still some really bad stuff on their social media with regard to women and how they view women. The idea that we would have a man enter a locker room and say, I belong here. This is my space. And we have the athletic directors, we have the schools, we have the governments, we have the state, we have the representatives, the federal government telling the women that are supposed to use these spaces that they've been designated for that, yes, this is his space and he is entitled to that. And we are telling the women, and the women say and have said, as they did at Penn, as they have at the YMCA or YWCA, as they have in many of the court cases that have been brought forward, the volleyball girls up in Vermont, we have these men have the backing, these boys and men have the backing of the governments and the organizational bodies that are creating the laws to say, yes, he belongs in there. And the women are saying, help me. This is uncomfortable. I don't like this. I have to change here. I have to have a space where I feel safe, where I not just safe, but where I feel I have some privacy and respect away from the male gaze. And the men are saying, we hear you. We don't care. That's mind-boggling to me that we will dismiss women's voices saying they need a space to get undressed, so that they feel comfortable accessing parts of the social fabric of our society, meaning participation in sports, in gyms, in health places, in theater, in businesses. We should have places we can go to remove ourselves from the proximity of men without someone telling us you can't do that. The men have access to you at all times. It doesn't make any sense.
No. Have you heard of autogynephilia? I'm assuming you have, but I just want to check. What do you mean by autogynephilic male?
First of all, it's a paraphilia. And so that category of mental illness, mental distress, or like it's basically like a mapping error of like internally experienced desire. To make it very, very, like to really like cut all the nuance away, it's basically a male bodied individual who's mapped his entire sexual desire onto basically himself as a female. And the draw in that comes from the fact that it's the only woman that he'll ever be able to control completely, is his own body. So he wants the embodied feeling of like suppressing and humiliating a woman who is mapped onto himself. So that's why the AGP displays are really important to them. It's really important to them to go out in public and to be in female spaces, because it's part of the thrill is watching other women sort of like have to swallow their disgust. It's, you know, it's a paraphilia that is absolutely in the same category as zoophilia and pedophilia. These are actually deeply distressing, antisocial, non-generative paraphilias, right? It's a dangerous for the self, dangerous for society.
It is part of the autogynephile's fetish to be able to go into a locker room and force a woman to swallow her disgust and swallow her and to be able to like dominate the situation. It's part of the intrigue. It's part of why they identify the way they do. And that's what makes it even more like upsetting.
Yes, of course I've heard all these things and I agree with you, but it's interesting because you hear, you know, someone like India Willoughby or whatever say, you're just painting trans people as predators. And no, that's not it.
No, I mean,
that's not it.
The fact of the matter is they're trying to hide the fact that 75% of these men are straight. They're straight heterosexual men that want to have sex with women. Like,
well, okay, I'm going to push back on you. I'm going to push back on you on that one. Here's my take on this. I could care less whether Lia Thomas is attracted to men or women.
For sure.
And I think, because I think this is a misnomer that I see up on Twitter and when people respond or even bring up as far as like the predatory situation. It doesn't matter who you're attracted to. We know that sexual abuse, sexual harassment, rape, you know, all of these domineering positions over women, all the abuse that centers around women and sexuality is about control and power. So a man who rapes a woman isn't necessarily attracted to her.
Oh, no, you're absolutely right.
Her. So the idea that there's a Lia Thomas or an India who wants to go into women's spaces, this is about controlling the space. This is about taking there are women that don't want you there, that don't want to sit in front of a man and recognize sex. And so the idea that you would remove that ability from women to be able to say no to a man who wants to enter that space, that's removal of consent. That's harassment. That's abuse. Yeah. That's the psychological warfare.
Oh, and absolutely.
So when you realize that, and for me, it was watching my daughter internalize that and recognize that she didn't have a right to say no, that the man had the power and the authority to declare himself as, you know, to declare himself as owner of that space.
No, I 100% agree with you. I don't think any men should be allowed, no matter what their orientation into women's spaces. saying that in the sense that they intentionally have tried to manipulate this and latch it onto the LGB to hide the fact, because if the majority of people knew the what is representative, because the fact of the matter is trans identified men are 5 times more likely to sexually abuse, to be convicted of sexual abuse, to be convicted of rape, and to be convicted of assault. They are more likely to be predatory. That's the data. Regardless, I mean, you could say that some of them are lying. I say maybe some of them are lying. I think some of them are AGP. And, you know, men that are AGP, it's a much, like, you know, psychologists have written about this. These things are getting scrubbed off the internet, but I have, like, you know, I'll probably add screenshots.
They are getting scrubbed off the internet, aren't they?
But 71% of serial killers were fetishists. And specifically written about transvestite fetishism carries a much stronger propensity of violence than other fetishes. These
Silence
men
of the Lambs.
They are more predatory. They are more dangerous. They just are. And I'm not going to ever stop saying that now. Like, there is not, like, yeah, they've latched onto the LGB. They've infiltrated the ACLU. They've done this all very insidiously, and now it's all coming to a head, but they've done it all very intentionally too, because they latched onto the goodwill of the gay liberation movement, which is why you see so many more and more, especially lesbians, speaking out against this stuff.
I just wish that there weren't children being sucked into this, because I do know, like, we have family friends. I mean, I don't think there's anyone that isn't directly connected to this in some way through family or friends. And the people I know, and so I mean, the people I know who have been through transition treatments, or, you know, who identify as part of that community. I mean, these are good people. They're not. And so it's really difficult to say, look, there's a problem with this.
Yeah.
We're stripping women of their rights. We're losing a grasp on reality. We're losing justice in our society. We're losing our ability to recognize justice. And yet there are people that you love and care about that are touched by this in a way that, you know, makes the conversation more difficult. I hope it makes us have the conversation with compassion, but it's hard when you see the damage that's being wrought.
Yeah, that's the issue with the trans umbrella, which is also very intentional, right? So there is that dysphoric kid, and then there's also the kids that are there's all these new things happening. Like, the reason Sweden and Finland were, like, the first to change courses because of the new cohorts that were coming. Were like, exactly, of course. Are
you talking about Sweden and Finland with the
medicalization? Okay. Yeah, they pushed back. They've essentially, like, I mean, Finland, I think, banned surgeries until 25. They basically banned blockers for anyone that isn't in a study. And if you ever are put on blockers, you can't ever, you've had to have developed dysphoria from a very young age. So they're not, you know, this new, you know, what Abigail Schreier talked about of the new trans identity, the majority is teenage girls with a host of comorbidities. So of course I have deep sympathy there. And these parents are being emotionally blackmailed. I mean, they're terrified.
Totally.
If a doctor or someone that's supposed to be a trusted medical professional is telling you that your child's going to commit suicide, I mean, what are you going to do?
Well, not just that, but now they're not just being emotionally blackmailed in that way. Now they're also being emotionally blackmailed by the states, by laws around the world, but in the US, to say, like, we're going to take your kid away because we're going to imply you're being a terrible parent if you don't do this. So they don't even have a way to question or seek out other opinions.
It chills me to the bone. That chills me to the bone. That is groomer 101. To triangulate away from the parents is
the children. So why
away from the parents?
Do you have any philosophy or guess as to why Finland was able to push through self-ID the other day after they've been taking positive steps for medical?
Yeah. So well, it's going to start weighing on them, their medical industry, if they keep. They have state health care, right? So it's going to get a lot more expensive. It's not as beneficial for them to have, a new generation of kids medicalized for life. That's part of it. But also I think it comes down to, we really need to educate the public on what's really going on in the trans umbrella, because people still have pity. And I think a lot of people associate it with the LGBT, so that they think that taking away, the self ID is bigotry. It's taking away someone's human rights. There's still that psyche within a lot of the public. People are so unaware.
Yeah.
Sorry?
I said, yeah, I think you're right. And then, so you don't want to take away someone's right to their own identity. No one does. But
no one really knows
the repercussions.
Yeah, no one. When I tell people what's going on in prison, they're horrified. Like if people are actually starting to know about that stuff. And I do think that there is still, misogyny at play. I do.
Oh, sure.
Women, we're supposed to be the ones that take the burden from everybody. That's how the society is kind of set up, is, we have this sort of egalitarian society a bit, but like women still have less money. Women still are doing the lion's share of the housework. Women still are doing the lion's share of the childbearing. Like, women are expected to take on everyone's burden. We're expected to.
That's a really good way to put this. We're expected to take on the burden. So we're expected to carry the burden of the mental baggage that a man has, or the difficulties he's having in society, to help him fit in. I think, I've spoken with one man who has identified as trans, and who has said, we've got to encourage the men to stand up here and say, hey, you're one of us, and you need to lean on us if you're having trouble. Don't go over and abuse the women, or ask them to do things that they shouldn't be being asked to do, to give up their recognition.
Yeah. And we've also created an untouchable class, right?
So I that's hard.
So I had a really interesting interview with a social worker before, and she talked a bit about the grooming gang scandal in the UK.
The
grooming gang scandal.
Okay.
So that was one of her first, red flags with the gender ideology movement. The grooming gang scandal was essentially, there was a population where there was groomings and of young girls, and being groomed and trafficked and raped by a population that was tied to a certain ethnicity. So when police went after them, they would be losing their jobs. Like there was a certain section of population that was basically untouchable, because to go after them meant you were a bigot, right?
Oh, the ethnicity. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And so now we've created another class of society, of people that they can do no wrong, that cannot be spoken ill about, and that is a very dangerous thing.
It is a dangerous thing. And I think we're encouraging the fact that you can identify into these communities. That's also disturbing. So, because we've never had classes of people before based on identity.
No. And that is a very weird change in language. When you're reading that someone identifies as white or identifies as disabled, you don't identify as these things. You are these things. If you're disabled, you are disabled. It's very strange, this new language being pushed. I see it around, and it makes me.
Have you read any of the postmodern stuff coming out, that's been coming out, the postmodern thinking, this idea?
Well, I've read Foucault, and I've read deconstructivism in college, but what are you exactly referring
to? I mean, I haven't read enough about this yet, but I know how I feel about it before I go too far. I've run into a couple people, just a handful of people now, who are making the argument for language, saying that we create our own realities, like the words only have meaning that we ascribe to them. So this is the argument that comes back when someone says, I will frequently tell someone when it comes to a situation like Lia Thomas or men in women's sports, this is a subjective personal identity. I can't tell someone how to see themselves, or how to perceive themselves, or how they want to be perceived, but I can tell them how I perceive them. And society can tell someone how they perceive them. I mean, let's take an extreme case. If you have someone, a serial killer, like we were just talking about, we don't have to perceive them as justified, even if they think they are. Society gets to decide whether or not that's a justified behavior. And we define a murderer based on a real concrete definition. So that's an extreme example. But these people, so the argument that came to me was a woman and a man are just what we define them to be. So we change reality if we change the definition of words. And that's nuts, because
I'm sorry, but no.
So that's where a lot of this is coming from.
Oh yeah, it's queer theory. It's queer theory, which is essentially the destruction of all boundaries and reality, as like being exactly what you say. And
well, there's no foundation for society. There's no foundation for any kind of communal living if we don't share language and we don't share common definitions, because we can't discuss. So it's such an anarchist, anti-human, anti-family, anti-civilization perspective. I don't see how people defend it. And yet I ran into two professors in a college, in an American university, that were trying to convince me that this was where we were headed and what was correct. And I was mind blown.
Yeah. So the destruction of boundaries is within that. And a lot of it is about access to children.
Yeah.
Because within queer theory, consistently is the push to try to remove boundaries from women and children, and to try to reduce or eliminate the age of consent.
Is that openly discussed in queer theory?
Yeah.
Actually, it seems you're acting like this is a spurious connection. So we're going to play Jeopardy. We're going to play queer theory. We're going to play queer theory pedophilia Jeopardy. Okay, answer. Commonly called the godfather of queer theory.
Who is Foucault?
Who is Foucault?
I got it.
Okay, 100 points. Foucault. Another way to ask this is, who argued, no, I guess the answer would be, argued for the eradication of age of consent laws, as in down to infants?
Who is Foucault?
Thank you.
Okay, next one. The author of the founding document of queer theory. Who is Gail Rubin? What percentage? No, the answer is 50%. Question is?
The amount in that article that was a defense of pedophilia, specifically, quote, boy lovers, so men who fuck boys.
Oh. And since you're not believing me, quote, this is in the founding document of queer theory. Like communists and homosexuals in the 1950s, boy lovers are so stigmatized that it is difficult to find defenders of their civil liberties, let alone for their erotic orientation. That's in the founding document of queer theory. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm using facts. A thousand apologies. One must never let facts in the way. Oh, and she also compared, by the way, she compared pedophilia to a preference for spicy food. The thing is, I have never heard of anyone who has to have years of therapy because they ate hot and sour soup. Okay, so up to 200. Now it is pedophilia and queer theory for 300. That would be author of Macho Sluts. Author of Macho Sluts and Public Sex. Pat Califia. Wait. What was it somebody said? Stay relevant. Okay, let's talk about Pat Califia.
Why don't you respond? Because I can't respond. Fucking transphone.
Okay, here's something from one of Pat Califia's books. It's really interesting. It's really interesting that when I actually start talking about the relationship between queer theory and anarchism and pedophilia, that it becomes, they really want to shut me up now. Sure do. Okay, so here's Pat Califia. Pat Califia. Oh, wait, just a second. I was accused of homophobia because I'm against pedophilia. Who is it who actually makes the connections between that? Okay, here's something by Pat Califia. Pat Califia has written, any child old enough to decide whether or not she or he wants to eat spinach, play with trucks, or wear shoes is old enough to decide whether or not she wants to run around naked in the sun, masturbate, sit in someone's lap, or engage in sexual activity, by which she does not mean play doctor, she means with adults. And she's very clear about that because she also says that pedophiles should be more and not less invested in children's lives. Okay, so we're at 300. 400 is the most famous queer theorist of today. Answer. No, it is not Judith Butler. It's who is Judith Butler? Okay, Judith Butler is the most famous queer theorist of the day.
We see you, all of you supporters here, who do not care about trans people's lives. Every person here supporting this that you don't.
Okay. Here's a great quote from Judith Butler.
That's not an argument, that's a bumper sticker. Then it's so fucking true. Are you supporting them?
Okay, so Judith Butler wrote, so I keep adding this qualification. When incest is when incest is a violation, suggesting I think there may be occasions in which it's not. Why would I talk that way? Well, I do think that there are probably forms of incest that are not necessarily traumatic, and which gain their traumatic character by virtue of the consciousness of social stain that they produce. Yeah, that's Judith Butler. That's one of the queer heroes. Okay, now we have for 500 we have the last one in the queer theory and pedophilia. The answer is queer theorist who has spoken out strongly against pedophilia.
Zero. Who is no one.
Who is no one, not a single one, because the entire thing is based on transgressing. Yeah, I know, dear fucking God.
I mean, queer theory is directly linked to and queer theory and gender ideology are.
Yeah. They're
it's anarchist in a way, but then it's also extremely fascist because the people in the top are the ones guiding the reality, and they're doing this because they want access and they want control.
Well, fascism. I mean, it's so funny. There's a professor at Yale who is supposed to be an expert, a philosophy professor who's supposed to be an expert on fascism. And, there's a massive blind spot because he falls on the side of, trans ideology. And you think that is all about controlling the language and controlling the narrative. It is the epitome of the foundation of fascism. If you control the language and you control how people speak, and you tell them to speak otherwise is hateful, that is the foundation. So it's the irony involved in many of these arguments is almost hard to reconcile. Well, not just almost hard. It's impossible to reconcile.
I wonder if it's in part because of severe cognitive dissonance that you don't want to admit that you're part of something so horrifying, or like the true dark underbelly of it. But then I also wonder, because there's so much revisionist history within this movement. And so, people associate, people should not equate fascism to Nazism, but that's what happens often because people's, greatest understanding of fascism was within the Nazi Party in World War II. And there's a lie that's been, there's been a revisionist rewrite in history that says that trans-identified men were, some of the biggest victims of the Holocaust. And it's fundamentally untrue. It was gay men. That's who it was. There was plenty of cross-dressers within the Nazi Party. They weren't in the camps. It was gay men. And it's disgusting to me. And, also there's a revisionist history Marsha P. Johnson being a trans-identified man. No, he admitted on tape. You can see him saying, I'm not a woman, I'm a man.
Pulled guns out on me because they didn't think I was, I would tell them I was a boy and I was in drag. And I would tell them that I would go like hustling and would they want to go out.
And it was a lesbian that started the Stonewall riots. He wasn't even there. So it's like you're taking, it's just, I wonder if the professor you're referring to has believed that, revised history of the oppressed trans person in World War II. And
I haven't gone on any deep dives.
And the other part of it is people want to equate fascism to right wing, and they equate the right wing. Left and right is totally, it's not defined in how it used to be at all.
I've come to a new understanding about that. I wonder what you think. I have a theory now. It's a circle. Go so far to the left or so far to the right, you end up on the other side.
I 100% believe in the horseshoe theory. Also, Mussolini coined the term fascism, right? Mussolini said fascism would more appropriately be called corporatism because it is the merger of state and corporate power.
Oh, so it becomes one.
And so what we're seeing now is 100% of all Western civilization, which is what's very unsettling to me, is that essentially all of the West has billionaire technocrats determining what's changing in society. It's a top-down forced colonization, language change, societal restructuring, and nothing is more fascist than that. That is the complete merger of state and corporate power.
I'm definitely not for the merger of state and corporate power because I don't want them to be together. I have a suspicion of large government as well, because I do believe that in every society, someone is going to eat the caviar and you're just choosing who. Yeah. The government, or you're choosing whether it's the businessmen. I mean, that's just how it will play, how it's played out all over time in history. And there's no reason to believe that we're going to do better the next time around at not allowing that to happen.
No, I mean, we have to check. We need the balance of powers. Like there's always we need the balance of powers to check human nature.
Yeah.
That there's always going to be.
I do think when you look at, as far as someone made the point the other day that, as far as a big business that has no checks on it, the government can, is pretty massive. So I'm wary of both.
No, I used to be hardline leftist. I flirted with Marxism in college, and I still consider myself a leftist in the sense that I believe in workers' rights. Mm-hmm. I believe in protecting the working. I believe in that workers see the means of production.
Yes.
And if you're not fighting for the working class, you're not on the left.
Well, and I'm stopping to say left and right now because I'm just saying, we've got to define what justice looks like. And so
I like that. I like that.
For justice.
I try to hold the line on the left because I've been called a Nazi more times than I can count. I really have, so
it's thrown around too much. It's for sure thrown. It's not too much, but I do think people recognize traits which this is the good part about that, is that people recognize traits that were part of the Nazi movement that they want to eradicate from society. The problem is they're not thinking through the foundation of those traits. The fact that we've been able to be there before means we should be wary of where we're headed. I do think that the foundation of being able to make progress on this issue or any other big issue we're going to face is going to be freedom of speech and open discourse. We've got to be able to say,
we are so lucky as Americans with our First Amendment. We have a more protected free speech than any other country. And we're seeing yes, people are losing their jobs. Yes, people are having to go to court, but the courts are siding on free speech. They're siding with the Constitution. And in Norway, I think is one of the worst, but now I think it's at least 3 women that have faced prison for online speech.
Oh, wow.
In Brazil, I think a feminist face up to 20 years. In the UK, women are consistently being visited by police. Kelly J.
I've noticed it. Right.
It's harrowing. In Canada, a father being jailed for misgendering his daughter.
I know.
These are that.
Well, we're doing similar things here with stripping parental rights on this basis. And so it is freedom of speech is going to be, I mean, that's going to, live or die, if we're going to be on that account.
I 100% agree with you. Now, you just put the NCAA on notice. We're kind of talking about freedom of speech, SCOTUS. You just threatened, or icons, just and a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
Took the next step and threatened a lawsuit. So I think it's going to be SCOTUS. What do you think? That's going to be at least to get the women's sports back.
Well, oh yeah. I mean, we're going to have to, if it's not SCOTUS, it's going to be the legislative body. We're going to have to define sex in law, in law, not. So we're going to have to define sex, and we're going to have to define what we mean by it's. What's preposterous to me about this is that we're asking lawyers to determine common sense things that, I mean, these things should not need to go to the courts. We should be able to get along with each other and recognize and have a common enough ground that there are things that we just agree on. We don't have to agree on what reality is. We should be able to accept it. So, but I think we are going to have to go there. I think, from a sports standpoint, we will end up at SCOTUS. I don't know how soon or what case it will be. Our purpose of our legal demand letter to the NCAA was first and foremost to get national media attention, to make sure that it was something that people knew that women weren't just going to stand by and watch this slide. I think it's important from, as we've said, the psychological warfare or the cognitive side of this abuse against women, this gaslighting, that we don't deserve respect and fair treatment or equal opportunities. We think it was really important for the media to have a story that said women will fight back. So that was message number one. Message number two was to make that that public announcement so that the NCAA knew that women aren't going to just be silent about this, and to give them a chance to respond. They have not yet. So we have a change of leadership going on. We're going to be patient enough to allow that change of leadership to occur and see if we can get meetings and, a chance to speak with them, tell them what's going on, introduce them to, the women who care, the lawyers that are working with us, the scientists, and, the human rights issues. So we're hoping that will happen. If it doesn't, then we are going to be working hand in hand with some really big leaders around the country that want to make sure that women's rights are defended. So we are not going to take this line down. We will take them to court if need be. We're not going to go away.
Amen. I love that. I do want to discuss, because there's a lot of criticism of these, of every female athlete that might not be speaking out. There's a lot of people that are like, well, that all the girls should get together and just not compete, and that's what should be done. And so I want to talk about how widespread and aggressive and that these schools suppressed these girls' ability to stand up, to be able to do that. And I want you to talk about that in case people don't know, because I don't think we should ever have to expect an 18 to 22-year-old girl to do any of that anyway. But the specific, it's.
No, what happened in the Ivy League last year was, I'm not sure there's a strong enough word for it. The only thing I can say is it was North Korean. It's not tolerable. I can't believe that I witnessed the bullying of young women to that extent. Not to that extent, like by those in power. We have placed coaches and directors of athletics in positions of power to defend the fair treatment of those athletes. That's what they're there for. They're there to make sure they're safe, to make sure they develop as humans, to make sure that they're protected both in their sport, but anytime they're in doing the activity that they're surrounded, to make sure the policies are fair and just, and every single one of these individuals has turned their back. Now, I don't blame them on an individual scale, because I think I know too many of them. Jobs. Well, they're terrified, yes, but that's where we get into the North Korea aspect. So but we need brave voices to stand up and say, I just don't know what happened. I was raised, I'm sure you were too. I mean, most of us thought that America was where if you saw something going on that was wrong, you did something right. You stopped it, you fixed it, or you tried to. You spoke out against it. You weren't going to collect a paycheck at the expense of your own integrity.
Yeah.
And we have reached a point right now where people don't feel like they can or should speak out when they see something terribly wrong going on, because they are frightened. That's a bad situation for us to be in. And these individuals were using their power, especially, and I'll call out Robin Harris all day long as the leader of the Ivy League. She owns the brunt of this responsibility. There is no way that she should have seen her directors of athletics at each of these schools and the coaches forcing down letters from the coaches to read off to these girls. I mean, boy, I should pull one up and read it to you.
You're welcome to if you'd like. Yeah, I've got time. I mean,
let me see if I've got it here. I'll just pull it up on my phone. The bullying that these girls went through, the emotional blackmail. My daughter called me after the speech from her team in tears, just saying, I can't be responsible. I don't want anything bad to happen there. It's going to be my fault. I'm going to have to accept responsibility. So you have to be quiet. I have to be quiet. We have to stop talking about this. And the girls, what she told me later on is that the girls even stopped talking so much about it amongst themselves. So they were in complete isolation as they were told, you don't get fair sports. Many of those girls had been swimming competitively and dedicating 2 to 4 hours a day of their life since they were, 6, 7 years old. And
one of my best friends went to Georgia Tech as a swimmer.
The amount of work and sacrifice they've put in, and now their universities say, you don't get fair sports. You don't get, they have, many of these girls have brothers, friends on the men's team, right? You don't get what they have. You don't get equal representation. You may not complain about it. If you have something to say, you have to clear it through us. You have to tell us what you're going to say. There will be repercussions if you don't. I mean, the implications, I can't. And then the idea that if anything bad happened to any of the trans classmates, their first priority needed to be the mental health and well-being. The fact that the announcements that were read off at the swim meet said, we don't like any forms of discrimination and transphobia and racism, and there was no sexism in there. The idea that half the world's population who has to deal with being female has to tolerate discrimination, and we're not even going to call it out as something they experience. I mean, it's mind-boggling.
And it breaks my heart that the first thing that your daughter is a very good person, by the way. She's a deeply empathetic. I don't know her at all, but just the fact that her first reaction to all of that was her concern that her speaking out would result in someone else, like in something bad happening to someone else, and not concerned with the fact that her rights were being trampled is. And that is, I think, also what they do.
I don't know if that's good though.
No, it's not good, but they're preying on the. I do think it's an 8. Some feminists will hate me for saying this, but I think that women are biologically designed to be more giving and more.
I agree with you.
Empathetic and more to care more. And they're preying on that. They're preying on, women's sort of natural empathy. And, even if it's conditioning, it's social conditioning, then they're preying on that. I think that I don't look at it as a weakness. I think women's ability to empathize, care, give from their bodies is one of the things that makes women so amazing. So I don't, but I might have some feminists in the comments telling me that no, it's female conditioning.
Okay, so here is what the Harvard letter said. The conversation, and first I'm going to read it out to you, then I'm going to read my paraphrase. So like everything, they wrote these, and like all propaganda for that matter, they wrote it in a digestible form that on its face, like you could say, oh, that's not so bad. And then when you sit back and read what it really communicated, it's really terrible.
Yeah.
Okay, so Lia Thomas, this is from Harvard. The conversations and controversy surrounding Lia have been challenging to read. In particular, they focus on what is fair and what is ethical. Regardless of your personal stance, Lia has been incredibly transparent and is abiding by all NCAA rules. That is a fact. Having watched Skylar's transition firsthand, I can tell you that if it wasn't for the support of the teams, he may not be here today. Life is more important than politics. While we will never tell you what to do or what to believe, it doesn't benefit our team from winning a championship if we spend our collective energy getting annoyed or frustrated. Let the NCAA figure out their next steps. Let us focus on our team. And if any press reaches out, then please direct them to our sports media office and ideally refrain from comment. So that's the handout. The discussions were far worse, right? The things that were read off. Let me paraphrase that for you. Let me divert your attention from feeling like something is wrong by asking you to focus on how good Lia has been. Let me emotionally blackmail you into accepting mistreatment because otherwise you are complicit in a potential death. And Skylar is omnipresent at Harvard, so you will be reminded of this every day. Exchanging your fair treatment for someone else's benefit, a male in this case, is a justifiable cause. And the fair treatment of women is just politics anyway. While we won't tell you what to do, we're telling you it is a bad choice to fight this. Let the men in charge at the NCAA decide your fate. Immerse your pretty little heads in the team. Let other people decide for you if you are worthy of fair competition without your input or your voice. Oh, and finally, don't talk. That's startling when you realize, like, if I take word for word what they said and put it into a communication that's telling the women, shut up, this isn't your place, and you are responsible for the mental health and well-being of these individuals and need to place that higher than your own personal achievements or your own personal mental health for that matter. Hard to read, right?
Yeah.
And that's what they were willing to put in print. So, I mean, the messages, it was constant and it was battering. And was that, like I said in my initial talk, when you realize how far it's gone, and you realize it's just not tolerable, that this isn't a situation you can be just step aside and say, oh yeah, women should have to go through this again.
Oh no. I mean, no. I'm in this fight till the end. I can't, like, this is our fight. Unfortunately, yep. We find ourselves here again. And because of their insidious indoctrination campaign for the last decade.
I envision our success in this as a growing web, like every woman is going to have her sphere of influence, her contacts, her passion, whether, if you've got young kids, it might be school, or if you've got kids involved in sports, it'll be sports, or if you've been politically active, it could be politics, or if you've been a defender of justice for the invisible, prisons, like.
For me, prisons is got to be the issue I'm probably gonna be the loudest about, or try, because I think it's the one that somehow it's the most taboo to talk about, even though it should be the most fundamentally on its face wrong. I have a sexual abuse history, and my mother and sister both do as well. And they both have my sister spent time in state prison. My mother spent time in federal prison. So
you've got a direct tie.
Yeah, they're no longer there. But I don't know, nothing could push me to violence more than knowing my sister and my mother was locked up with a rapist.
Oh my gosh.
Lose my mind. And yeah, I kind of got a dark backstory, and then my brother, the medicalization of kids is my other big fight, because my brother he had a spinal issue when he was 16 that put him on opioids, and he died by 20 from them. And they were all legal. And so I know, have
you got connections to doctors who are trying to deal with the medicalization of kids in an ethical way? Have you gotten any?
No, I haven't. Some. I should try. Yes, please do. I would like to have more. I haven't done that yet. I had an interview with Scott Nugent, who knows a ton about that, but I haven't really had an episode that was dedicated to the actual medicalization. I've touched on it in a lot of different ones, but I had one with a social worker that was really more about the elimination of safeguards for kids. And about, what is truly grooming and what's going on, and Scott and stuff, but I would love to, talk to someone in the medical professions.
Yeah, I think there are some really good endocrinologists. I don't know if they would be willing to talk openly, publicly, on a talk show yet, but because they're working really hard at influencing the medical community. But yeah, I think they might know people who would be willing to speak openly. Yeah. So I'll see if I can help you with that. When it comes to activism and what we can do as individuals, you said you've run into a lot of brick walls with right emails and letters.
Oh yeah, I mean, I just got I tried, and I either would get nothing back or just nonsense about homeless statistics and housing statistics. I'm not I would be I'm not talking about sports and prisons. I'm not they wouldn't even broach the topic.
No, the email responses that I got back that weren't, so I got one personalized email response back that was basically I received your message, I read it out loud, thank you for sending it. It was that's the one response I got back that was personalized. The other responses that I got back were all just the automated, see this website about our position on LGBTQ rights, so that it was, just cut dry. But what I found was, so you can go to meetings, the more conversations you have, the more someone will say, oh, I know someone you can talk to. So I'll just tell you my path, and maybe that will help someone who hears this. I reached out to my neighbors that I knew were politically active. And I said, who can you put me in touch with? I just want to talk to someone and let them know what's happening, what's going on. We need laws right now that protect women's sports, but we also need laws that protect women's right to speak out about sex-based rights. And so that was my in. Someone connected me to my local rep. They connected me then to other local reps, who then told me about open houses for our, federal representatives. And then I made a point of, being the one to speak up first at the mic and ask for a meeting and ask for a business card when you're in person, so you can schedule a meeting. And then the conversations, the connections, with one conversation leading to another, everyone knows someone, and everyone, the degrees of separation are small. It's one or two. So if you're determined to get to speak to someone, your school superintendent, your representative at your state, your senator, your congressman, all it takes is determination. It doesn't take any special status. It doesn't take any, particular issue of the moment, meaning it's explosive in your region. It just takes determination. So it's just finding the right person to connect you. So you just have to care enough, I think, honestly.
Yeah. And what I love, what I found that I really love about this movement is that people are so willing to throw the ladder down or to like connect with you, or to just because it's really about getting the message out, and people really that is the main incentive, which I do think that there's a lot of things at play at how this all came into fruition, but activism becoming a business is a big culprit in that. And so now that we have grassroots movement of people that their incentive isn't donations, their incentive is to change this. It's really a grassroots movement that's about.
Totally.
Yeah.
I love that too. And I do think that the more people that we have speaking out, and I do think everyone has a role too, whether it's, if what you're comfortable with is quiet conversation, that's fine. If what you're comfortable with is being outspoken, that's fine. If what you're comfortable with is writing, that's fine. If, you work, I just think everyone has their role. So figure out what your sphere of influence is, try to break out of it just a little bit, to the point of we can't do anything real if we're not willing to get a little uncomfortable, but it just takes the little bit of step, the little tiny first step. And we say this to everyone that reaches out to us through Icons. You don't have to speak out publicly or be in the media. You don't have to put your name out there. Not everyone has to be that person. You take off what you're comfortable with and what you can do while you're still protecting your family and you're protecting your own health and mental well-being. So there's a role for everyone. It doesn't have to be, not everyone has to fit the same mold.
No, and sometimes things can be more effective that way. Like, if like the medical professionals you're referring to, if they started speaking out, they might lose their influence in a way. They might not be as effective. They might not be able to get what they can get done if they start doing things in a different way. So yeah, there's many different ways to fight this. Now, I do, you mentioned we're losing our ability to critically think.
Yes.
And you've also, when we spoke privately before, you mentioned that it's university wide, that our higher education is
I have some strong opinions about college
and
education.
I'd love to talk about that, because I think that it's one of the things I like about my position is that I still pretty much exist in a liberal bubble, and so a lot of times when people are hearing things from me, they're only hearing it from me because they don't receive this information outside of their echo chamber. And I think that the left, or the liberals, or the people on that side of the current American ideology, need to understand the level to which our side is attacking free speech and freedom of thought. And it's really, really taking place. The university should be the safest place to speak your mind. It should be the most dedicated to free speech. And that chills me too.
Oh, removing, when you send a child off to school, elementary school, middle school, high school, and then a young adult off to college, our goal has been to get them to think critically. It's not been to provide them with information. You can go send someone off to the public library and they can go read the history books, or they can go online. The goal is to think critically. It's to hear opposing ideas. It's to be challenged. It's to think for yourself. And even if you're teaching, so I've taught undergraduate classes before, and
that's cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah. The goal is to be challenged. It's to learn on both sides of the equation, whether you're the one speaking or the one listening, whether you're the one that's old or the one that's young. And the thought that there's only one right way to view a particular issue or problem, that is the antithesis of what academia and education are supposed to be. And from what I've seen, I have 2 kids at Yale right now, and one that's about to go. I felt like I helped my kids learn how to read. I taught them how to do multiplication. School was practice and socialization. I'm not blaming the teachers for not doing their job, but it's absolutely parent involvement to make sure your kids are are learning and staying engaged and on a good path academically and for intellectual development. The same thing is happening in school. So I'm having to have phone conversations with them and say, are you question everything that's coming your way? Are you getting, one side of, when they provide you with a resource, are you making sure that you know what the other resources are? So this is a heavy burden to place on kids. This actually should be the burden of the universities.
Yeah.
So if you've got one resource, give me the other one, and let's talk about them and make sure they're both good. They're both from the same caliber of argument, of respected persons. So, and I'm not seeing that in their reading materials and in their discussions. But now, since this last year, we've become a whole lot more aware, and the conversations have gotten really more interesting when they come home for holidays and tell us about what they're learning. But I mean, I had always been a huge believer in college. I loved school. I was there.
I mean, like if I had all the role, I'd just be in school forever, to be honest. So I went to Stanford for undergrad and for graduate school, and I left my academic experience thinking exactly what you're saying. I'm a student for life. Like, I love to learn. I love to question. I like engaging with people. And I don't think that's not the experience my kids are getting. And it's not the experience their peers are getting at different schools around the country. It really has become far too much of an indoctrination. And here's the information you get and spit it back out. It's not critical thinking. A serious dumbing down going on for that. And I noticed it even I noticed it in how they're able to articulate their political views when we have debates or conversations. So I'm not pleased with where we are headed with higher education. I do think that you can do more for yourself outside of schools if you're an intellectually curious person than you can for yourself inside of schools. And that's a horrible statement for someone like me who's such a believer in that experience. So neat that you had the same. Oh, yeah. I mean, I was raised like a lot by my grandparents. They're both public educators. They were both civil rights activists. Before desegregation, they taught in all Black schools. And we had political debates at our dinner table my whole life. And in college, I mean, I majored in politics. I double majored in politics and English. And like we were filled with like debates and like really heated, sometimes like raising voices like of different viewpoints and stuff, but we were friends after, and it was okay, and that was stimulating.
We need to get back to that.
Like, but what is interesting to me is when I engage with the other side, the TRAs, the trans activism, it's like engaging with an automated computer system. I know what their talking points are. I know exactly. It's like it's
yes,
it's wild. They say all of the same things, and then they ghost or they start slurring you.
Well, and that's the name calling is where things have to stop. Slurring and name calling. If we're going to have and it's interesting when I speak with someone on the other side of my concern about women's sex-based rights. I agree. I feel like I know what the talking points are, but I'm also open to learning if there's something new that's come up. What I have found is that the name, it's just, oh, you're just a bigot. You're just mean. You just can't see, and go make friends with someone who's a member of the trans community. I am now friends with more people in the trans community than ever. I grew up knowing who Renee Richards is. Renee was coaching several of the girls on the national tour when I was young. So my early exposure to someone who was a member of the trans community, that's young. And I had no problem with Renee. Renee was a very nice person. And then now, of course, like I said, my kids are young enough. They're involved in kind of the group of people that are going through this from what I would say a social contagion era. Yeah. So a lot of people identifying under that umbrella of trans and the flag. So I'm exposed to that, but I'm also exposed to a whole bunch of people a generation older now. I've gone to dinner in New York City with several people, and I have found them to be really intellectually curious and on the same page by and large with understanding the importance of women's sex-based rights, but just for several of them also, and there's also a lot of them concerned with the medicalization, but they're concerned with just allowing people to present in a way that's comfortable for them, which I'm all for.
I 100%. I love, personally, I love gender nonconformity.
It's a personal
wear the
expression.
Dress, wear the makeup, do you. Stop policing my thoughts, stop compelling my speech, stop colonizing my spaces.
Yes, 100%. Right. No,
like these are not like this. The whole just let your why do you have such a hard time letting people live their lives? That's not what this is.
That makes no sense. Yes, exactly. Or the existence of people. Individuality is what we want to celebrate.
Yeah,
it's even in sports, individuality is what we want to celebrate.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that the response of go know some of these people like I have. And
well, that's why I feel the way I do. I mean, I have read trans academia. I have read the other side. I spent about 7 years trying desperately not to be a TERF because I knew what that would mean for me. I knew it would mean that like I would be leaving. I knew like it's
right. I knew this is a whole thing with perception, right?
I don't think anyone is more I think people very much underestimate also how well researched, Team TERF is, how much we know, how most of us really tried to see the other side. We have exercised, the TERFs won me over, the argument's stronger.
I agree with you.
Which is why they want no debate.
I know. I love what Kara Dansky says when I think it was the first time I heard someone just put this all in one sentence for me. And she said, there is no one on earth for whom sex is irrelevant. And that's the fundamental core of it.
Yeah.
We can't ignore it. So, there are places. And then I was discussing racism and sexism, and someone was saying, oh, how do you come back with this? We segregating people is what we did in racism.
You know what? No, I'm sorry. Black people are allowed their own spaces because they were oppressed. BET's okay. Their own civil rights organizations. Equating the oppression of African Americans or Black people around the globe to men being, it's not the same. It's extremely racist because it's always like, well, you let a Black woman go in the bathroom. So you're saying if a Black woman can go into the bathroom, so can a man. That's racist. That's what racism is. But also it's a logical fallacy because what you're comparing a historically oppressed group of people with the oppressor. It doesn't compare.
So I have a response to that too. And my response is that there are times and places where we have to recognize race and we have to recognize sex. And it is government and society's responsibility to justly choose when those places increase discrimination or dangerous policies, and when they are necessary to prevent discrimination and dangerous policies.
That's brilliant. That's really, really, I'm going to start using that argument.
Because
it's really well said.
If we ignore race all the time, we cause major problems. We won't know when our policies are doing good or doing bad, harming or helping. And in healthcare, you would be discriminating against individuals because you need to be able to care for them at your optimum knowledge of what they're susceptible to. And then the same thing is true for sex. There are times when you shouldn't tell a woman, oh, you can't do math because you're a woman. That's discriminatory. But there are times when you need to recognize her sex, as in physical contest, in order to not discriminate against her so that she has an equal opportunity and fair representation. That the most important, and you talk about prisons, but one of the things I think that gets overlooked is representation. And I don't mean representation in like business or in leadership positions. I mean representation as in, let's have accurate statistics so we know where there's a problem, or we know where women are, or what people gravitate towards, or where there's a problem, or where there's success. And it shocks me. One last thing I want to say before you can ask me whatever you want, and then we can wrap up. But one last thing I want to say is, generally people want to celebrate the newcomer on the block, right? This new interesting person. But what I think we've lost sight of is that these are the men taking women's places. So we've got men who are the highest paid woman CEO in America, the Jeopardy champion of all time. We've got men winning national and international titles, taking podium spots, prize money, and so forth from women. And we've got, a man winning the Golden Globe, and we've got men winning all these titles that are now gender neutral. And then the women who identify as men are famous on cover stories for being pregnant. We know that there are several women who identify as men, and they're famous. They get covers or stories because they've gotten pregnant. If we can't see the sexism in there and the misogyny, that women are supposed to hand over to the men all of the great titles and things that have been set aside for women, and women who want to identify as men get recognized for their reproductive services. That was like a mind-blowing moment for me when I put that together. And then we've got a couple of women, females, women that are in positions of power, just very few, but they're in positions where the fact that they are women makes a difference. Meaning in my opinion, they're 100% being used to be a speaker to justify men to oppress other women. And that's startling to me. Not only are the males in our population getting to take all the prizes set aside for women and all the wonderful notoriety, but the women who are identifying as men are either becoming famous because they can get pregnant, and they're not becoming famous in name just because they are just because of their identity status. And then the other women are being used to hand over more things to men. And that is, I find that that's something that's hard for me to get my head around, that a woman would betray other women in that way.
Yeah.
Right? Do you see like Nicola Sturgeon doesn't identify, but she's willing to hand over the rights to men?
Yeah. I mean, my own personal heartbreak was Warren. I've loved Elizabeth Warren for over a decade. I've loved her. And
did you see the letter that she wrote?
Yeah, I had some words for her in her comments. I'm sure she never saw, but I mean, I campaigned hard for her when she was running, and seeing that.
Well, what about Cory Booker signed that letter? He overlapped with me for a year. He was a football player at Stanford, and he was able to put his name on something that said there's no difference. It doesn't, well, I can't remember the exact quote, so I'll have to paraphrase, but it doesn't, there's no disadvantage for women having to compete.
And they wanted them to even go further with Title IX. They didn't do enough to erase our sex-based rights.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
Yeah. That was hard. It's been really, really heartbreaking to see. And just to see I understand how you say, like, how did the Nazis come to be? I kind of get it. Like, I get it now. It's the parroting of the idioms. It's the talking points. It's the dumbing down of critical thinking, and it's instilling fear in people. And it's, people being so selfish that they put themselves before their own, before the other women that.
No, there was a great tweet that I read about, and I do hate the comparison because I agree with you, like the, World War II, Hitler, the Nazis, that's such an extreme situation, but we can learn a lot from our extremes, right? From the extremes of history. And this tweet said something to the extent of, I used to wonder how that could have happened. And now I get it. It wasn't that people didn't care. It wasn't that they didn't see the atrocities. It wasn't that they didn't want to fight against it with everything they were. But it was fear of holding people back. And it was the people who are shouting as loud as they can being silenced. Mm-hmm. And that's where fear. So I think the biggest thing is fear. We've got to empower people to state their opinions, to share their positions. We've got to let people recognize, to let people make mistakes. We've got, for progress to happen, we have to let people make mistakes and like I said, verbalize and articulate their thoughts and recognize, oh, what I said doesn't make sense. And what you've said makes more sense. And I want to change. We've gotten to this point where I think, especially for our politicians, they're afraid to make, they're afraid to make any kind of statement on any kind of controversial issue, because what if they have to backtrack? And we've got to be willing to let people speak and to evolve. We've got to recognize that people in the past were doing the best they could at the time, and we've got to learn from those problems. But fear and freedom of speech are like, we can't have fear and we must have freedom of speech.
Now, I always like to end these conversations with what you would say to someone right now, American, or anyone really who wants to fight against this. What would you say to them to encourage them that now is the time to speak out?
Okay. I have a bunch of things. I think we should talk about this for a little while.
Yes, I'd love to. We have plenty of time.
Okay. I think that I would say, so first of all, every voice matters. Every voice matters. And every conversation is important. So the most intimidating part about this is crossing the Rubicon of opening your mouth. That is it. As soon as you go across the road and say, I'm done, I'm going to speak about this, I want to explore, even if you're not sure exactly where you fall, excuse me, if you're not sure exactly where you fall or how to articulate things, the best thing you can do is start talking. I had a really interesting conversation with a prominent academic who said, one of the big things we're missing in society right now, especially in our youth, but in the women's rights movement in particular, and in political movements right now, we're losing our ability to think. And the reason we're losing our ability to think is because we're too afraid to talk. Mm-hmm. There's a progression that happens. You have a thought, and then you put words to it. We put words to it, whether they're written words or spoken words. And that helps us figure out if what we're saying makes sense. It helps us relate to other people or relay ideas. It helps us test our thought process. It helps us, and it helps our mind reiterate what we're thinking, to grow and develop it and make it become real. When we stop the words, we stop the process of development into thinking. So the first thing I think women need to do is not just sit quietly and not talk about this, even if they need safe spaces. Go to, listen to webinars, talk to your friends, find someone you can find small groups where you can talk back and forth and ask each other things. I mean, in a comfortable space, like, do you have documented support of that? What study have you seen? What's that treaty say about women's rights? Like, you've got to be willing to talk and explore in order to wrap your head around these things. So the first thing that happened to me when I saw, when I had the conversation with the ACLU, when I figured out what was going in sports and that no one was coming, the first thing I did was start talking to friends. talking to my husband, talking to my kids, reading. This is how you educate yourself. And by educate yourself, it's not just taking input. Educating yourself is a thought process, right? It's where does this make sense? Where are my holes? Is what I'm thinking clear and rational? Am I able to articulate what I believe in a way that makes sense, not just to me, but to someone else? So I think the first thing we have to do is talk. We have to talk, we have to read, we have to listen. And next thing we have to do is find the avenue that we can make an impact in. So you've already started to make impacts because conversations grow, they spread like wildfire. But we're going to have to deal with this politically. We're going to have to deal with this emotionally. We're going to have to deal with this in education. So if you want to make an impact, you can go through your local legislatures. You need to talk to school teachers and school boards. It depends on what your sphere of influence is. Are you in sports? Can you talk to other athletes? Can you talk to coaches? Can you provide information? And the early conversations lead to bigger conversations. So if you talk to coaches and they say, oh, I agree, I don't know much about this though, then you say, well, who can I get in touch with? Then you go up to a governing body or, a state legislature or your governor. I have found that the path of access to people is not as hard or as daunting as we initially think. I think you can just start speaking. Like if you reach out to your local state representative for your state government, they know they want to have the conversation. So emails and phone calls are really hard. That's where I started too.
Okay.
So I would say, it's not that the emails and the phone calls make no difference. They do, because mass movement, public opinion, it helps you figure out what you want to say. I think any practice in writing, any practice in speaking, it's all beneficial. And it's a forward step. But your local rep, by your local rep, I mean, like if we have state government, right? Mm-hmm. So your state rep, whether it's your congressman or your senator at your state government, is responsible for a pretty small group of people. Yeah. So they're a little easier to access. And generally what I found is even the ones neighboring to you, you can reach out to pretty easily. So like on the border of your community or your district. You can go to open houses. There are open houses usually for most congressmen and senators in your state. You just have to go look and see where they are. And usually there will be one relatively close. School board meetings are an important place to speak up. We've seen a whole bunch of those posted on Twitter, right? Moms groups, reading. There's great books out there that you could suggest. Let's read and discuss this. And it's okay to hear from the other side. So there's nothing to be afraid of when it comes to public discourse. And then if you're in sports, I think come to Icons, first of all, like sign up on our network.
Yes, please. And also donate. I will be linking it and everything like that too. So
awesome. So our goal is to get women organized in both state areas to give them the resources that they need to have the conversations to influence their state governments, but also in their various sports or in their high school, like local areas. So like the state of Connecticut has a high school organization. Those are the people we need to influence and talk to. You can definitely reach out to governors, and you can reach out to governors in other states to say, hey, I love what you're doing for women. I appreciate this dance. I may not agree with you on everything. How can I reach my governor? You can ask for advice. Just every little message like that helps. But let's see. I would say local government, school boards, every conversation is helpful. Getting involved in one of the groups like WDI, Wolf, or CWA or IWF, just letting them know, finding out from them or keeping abreast of where things are happening or where events are happening. With our website, we hope to eventually have like a running list of, you can go here to this event is happening. We're going to have a conference again this summer in Florida this year, I believe.
Oh,
yeah. So we'll post that.
Yeah, please.
it will be a place for women to gather to discuss these issues and learn. We'll have phenomenal speakers, just like we did last year. But the camaraderie and the conversations are the most important part.
Yeah.
Because you start to feel a strength in numbers. We're building a tsunami here.
And the practice of speaking, it just becomes easier. You rip the Band-Aid and
yes.
I feel so much more empowered now that I'm speaking out, because I know I'm standing in truth and I know I've done my research, and there's something very strong about finally standing your ground.
Totally.
You know, and I love the best thing to come out
of all. It's liberating, isn't it?
Movement. Oh, it's so, I can breathe.
Yeah.
I was like, I felt like I couldn't, I realized I was like, couldn't breathe for so long, because I was not raised to be what was becoming of like the industry I was part of, and like the suppression of free speech. It's antithetical to the core of who I am. And I just couldn't breathe for years. I felt like I just couldn't breathe.
I know. But I do think, so it's liberating to be able to speak. You feel like you take your agency back.
Yes.
And I think just a few steps into starting to speak, opportunities open up. And so that's why I was saying, like, get involved or follow along with either us, Icons, or any of the other groups we've talked about, because listening to other women, and we're starting these organizations. I mean, Wolf has sued the state of California. We're going to take on the NCAA and any governing body that won't defend women. We're just going to do it. It's not, might be small. We're just a couple, months old, maybe a year old now. The idea has been percolating for far longer, and we're growing like wildfire. All of these organizations are. There are feminist groups popping up all over the
world. I love, it's really wonderful to see.
But it's getting involved or connecting with those is, it makes you realize that like all's not lost, that we're going to make forward progress. And I spent too long feeling defeated, like, oh my gosh, this Twilight Zone, this dystopian world. And it's like, no, we can do something.
Yeah. I don't know. What you endured was a million times more traumatizing than listening to you tell your story. And I felt like the world was caving in.
Gosh.
I can't imagine what you must have felt like. To the ACLU.
I wish that power in numbers had turned the tide against silence. I wish that society was in a place where it would recognize the effects of this run deeper than one person. I wish people knew the ACLU's current stance and the danger of mangling the meanings of words that define women. I wish that women, and men for that matter, were not in a place where we had to defend ourselves from the absurd idea that men can be women, that men can compete as women. I cannot believe that we are having to argue that women and girls deserve to be able to get dressed and undressed without men in their locker rooms. Now, more teams and more women across the country will race against Lia at NCAAs. I want this to go away, but I need it to stay in the limelight and in the news. Now that I see it, now that I know, I desperately want people to wake up to the world we are creating for women.
First things first, I'ma say all the words inside my head. I'm fired up and tired of the way that they